It lay on the kitchen table as if accidentally left behind, but Ava knew better. Nothing in her Aunt Edith's house was ever accidental. Especially not when it came to the past. Especially not when that past was her own. The letter was handwritten on thick cream paper, in the old-fashioned neatness Edith had drilled into all her nieces since childhood. A letter is the face of the soul. Never let your soul look careless. Ava didn't touch the envelope. She just stared at it, feeling a chill crawl up her spine because she recognized the handwriting. And she understood. Mason was back. October in Minnesota isn't just a season, it's a state of mind. A cold wind off Lake Superior sweeps through the streets, chasing fallen leaves as if trying to erase every trace of summer. Ava lived in a small town in the northern part of the state, where everyone knew each other and strangers were noticed immediately. She worked as a librarian, lived in a modest house with a garden stubbornly clinging to its last blooms, and almost never thought about what had happened 10 years ago. Until this letter. Mason was her cousin. Not just a relative, he'd been part of her childhood, her youth, her brightest joys and darkest memories. They'd grown up together like brother and sister. But then, everything changed. Not in a single day, not because of one act. It was a slow poison, envy, resentment, things left unsaid. And one day, it spilled over into a betrayal so deep Ava left without looking back. Now he was back. And the letter sat on the table like a challenge. Ava finally picked it up. Inside were only 3 lines. I'm sorry for what happened then. But you weren't innocent either. Come to the old farm on Saturday. There's something I need to return and something I need to take. Signed, Mason. She crumpled the letter and threw it into the fireplace. But a minute later, she pulled it back out. The paper wasn't yet touched by ash. She smoothed the creases as if trying to smooth out her own memories too. The farm stood on the edge of town, half an hour's drive from anything resembling civilization. Once, it had been a thriving homestead belonging to their grandfather. After he died, the land was divided among his children, but no one wanted to work it. Only Mason had briefly returned after college, trying to restore the legacy. Then he vanished. Just like Ava. Saturday dawned overcast. Ava pulled up to the gate in the old pickup she'd bought her first year in town. The gate stood slightly ajar. Her heart pounded so loudly it drowned out the wind. Mason waited on the porch. He changed, broader now, his face firmer, less boyish. But his eyes were the same, dark, piercing, with that strange mix of sadness and defiance Ava remembered from childhood. You came, he said, not smiling. You asked, she replied, stopping a few feet away. Silence hung between them like mist over a lake. Why did you come back? Ava finally asked. Because it's time to settle accounts, he said, stepping aside to let her in. Inside, the house looked neglected but not abandoned. It smelled of coffee and old wood. On the table sat a box. This is yours, Mason said, nodding toward it. Ava approached and opened it. Photographs. Their childhood snapshots. Letters she'd written him in college. Her old journal. You kept all this, she whispered. I stole it, he said plainly. The day you left. I knew you wouldn't come back if you found out. And you didn't. Ava felt a lump rise in her throat. She remembered that day. Remembered how she couldn't find her journal, the one where she'd written about her feelings for him. Not as a brother, but as a man. And how ashamed she'd been. Then came the rumor that Mason had bragged about her confession to his friends. She'd left that very evening. Was it true, she asked, eyes downcast. Did you tell everyone? Mason was silent for a long time. Then he said, No, it wasn't me. It was Edith. Ava looked up sharply. What? You think I'd parade something sacred to you like a trophy? His voice cracked with pain. I hid that journal for years. But Edith, she overheard us talking. Saw how you looked at me. Decided it was wrong. So she started the rumor to drive you away. Why didn't you say anything? Because you left without asking. And I didn't know how to stop you. I was afraid that if I told the truth, you'd think I was lying just to get you back. Ava sank into a chair. Everything she'd believed for 10 years crumbled in a minute. Edith had always been strict. Fair, as she called it. But her fairness had no room for weakness. She'd raised her nieces and nephews after their parents died and believed she knew what was best for them. She was afraid Ava began. That we'd break the order, Mason finished. That the family would lose face. That you'd choose me over a proper future. But we didn't do anything wrong. To her, even the thought was a crime. They sat in silence as rain began to patter against the window. Why tell me this now? Ava asked. Because Edith is dying, he said quietly. Cancer. She asked me to find you. Said she wanted to apologize. But I couldn't just call. I knew you wouldn't believe me. So I wrote that letter. I needed you to come. To see, I was never your enemy. Ava felt tears welling. Not from anger. Not from hurt. But from a strange relief, as if for 10 years she'd carried a stone on her shoulders without even knowing it was there. And you? She asked. Do you still love you? He gave a bitter smile. Every day. But not the way I used to. Now it's different. Deeper. Quieter. Like a river, not a storm. She nodded. She understood. Edith lay in a hospital bed, wrapped in a thin blanket. She looked fragile, almost translucent. When Ava entered, she opened her eyes and smiled for the first time in years without judgment. You came, she whispered. Mason said you wanted to apologize. Yes. I was cruel. I thought I was protecting you. But really, I was just afraid. Afraid you'd choose each other anyway. And if you did, I'd have to admit I didn't control your lives. You had no right, Ava said, but without bitterness. I know. Forgive me. Ava stepped closer and took her hand. The old skin was cold. I forgive you, she said. But not for you. For me. So I can finally let go. Edith nodded and closed her eyes. She died 2 days later. 6 months passed. Ava still worked at the library, but now she visited the farm on weekends. Mason had started restoring the house. They weren't lovers. They weren't just friends. They were what remains after the storm, 2 people who'd walked through lies, pain, and fear and could still look each other in the eye. One evening, as the sky blazed crimson, Ava said, You know, real revenge isn't about hurting someone. It's about refusing to become what they made you. Mason smiled. Then we both got our revenge. They sat on the porch in silence, watching stars rise over Minnesota. And in that quiet, there was no resentment, no fear, only peace. The kind worth fighting for.